Nothing about the immortal jellyfish makes sense. Here's why. There's a creature in the ocean that shouldn't exist. Not because it's rare. Not because it's hidden in some unreachable trench. But because it violates one of the most fundamental rules of life itself. Every living thing on Earth follows the same inevitable path. Birth, growth, decay, death. From the smallest bacteria to the largest whale, nothing escapes this cycle. It's written into the code of existence, hardwired into every strand of DNA that's ever replicated. Except for one. Deep in the Mediterranean Sea, drifting through currents older than human civilization, there floats a translucent bell no bigger than a pinky nail. Delicate tentacles trail beneath it like threads of living glass. To the untrained eye, it looks fragile, temporary, the kind of creature that would dissolve at the slightest touch. But this jellyfish has discovered something that has eluded every other organism in 4 billion years of evolution. It has learned how to cheat death, not by living longer, not by healing faster, but by reversing time itself. The story begins in the summer of 1988 in a small laboratory overlooking the Ligurian Sea. Christian Sommer was a student then, collecting samples of hydrozoans, tiny jellyfish-like creatures, from the shallow waters near Rapallo, Italy. His goal was simple: study their life cycles, understand their reproductive patterns, catalog their behaviors. Standard marine biology. Nothing groundbreaking. He placed several specimens of Turritopsis dohrnii in petri dishes, gave them controlled conditions, and waited for them to mature, reproduce, and die. This was supposed to be routine observation. But the jellyfish didn't follow the script. Instead of dying, they did something Sommer had never seen before. When faced with stress, injury, starvation, age, the adult jellyfish didn't just deteriorate. They transformed. Their bell-shaped bodies began to collapse inward. Their tentacles retracted and were reabsorbed. Within days, the adult jellyfish had regressed into a blob of tissue on the seafloor. A polyp, the larval stage. Then, from that polyp, new jellyfish budded and grew. Genetically identical to the original, but young again. The adult had become a child. Sommer documented it, published it, and for years the scientific community barely noticed. It seemed like a curiosity, an anomaly, perhaps a laboratory fluke. But it wasn't, because in the decades since, researchers have confirmed it again and again. Turritopsis dohrnii doesn't just reverse aging under stress. It does so reliably, repeatedly, potentially forever. This isn't rejuvenation. This isn't healing. This is biological time travel. To understand what makes this impossible, you need to understand what aging actually is. Every cell in your body has a job. Skin cells protect. Nerve cells transmit signals. Muscle cells contract. They are specialized, differentiated, locked into their roles by chains of chemical instructions that can't be undone. When you were an embryo, your cells were different. They were stem cells, blank slates with infinite potential. They could become anything: bone, brain, blood. But once they chose a path, that choice was permanent. A heart cell can never become a liver cell. A neuron can never become muscle. This is called differentiation, and it's irreversible. Except in Turritopsis dohrnii. When this jellyfish regresses, it doesn't just shrink. It rewrites itself at the cellular level. Its specialized adult cells, muscle, nerve, reproductive, undergo a process called transdifferentiation. They abandon their identities. They despecialize, returning to a stem-like state, and then respecialize into entirely different cell types. A muscle cell becomes a nerve cell. A digestive cell becomes part of the outer skin. It's as if a retired firefighter woke up one morning as a newborn infant, with all the knowledge erased, all the scars healed, all the damage undone. And then did it again. And again. Scientists still don't fully understand how this is possible. The genetic mechanisms are there, specific genes that activate, proteins that cascade, cellular signals that trigger the transformation. But why Turritopsis can do this, and why almost nothing else can, remains one of biology's deepest puzzles. There are other organisms that regenerate. Flatworms can regrow entire bodies from a fragment. Axolotls can regenerate limbs, spinal cords, even parts of their brains. Hydras barely age at all. But none of them reverse the aging process entirely. None of them loop back to the beginning. Only the immortal jellyfish. Here's where it gets stranger. If Turritopsis dohrnii can theoretically live forever, why isn't the ocean filled with them? Why aren't they the dominant species on Earth, outnumbering every fish, every whale, every plankton? If death is optional, shouldn't immortality be an unstoppable evolutionary advantage? The answer reveals something profound about the nature of survival. Because immortality, it turns out, is not the same as invincibility. The jellyfish can reverse aging, yes, but it can't reverse being eaten. It can't reverse disease. It can't reverse being torn apart by storms, crushed by debris, or starved of nutrients. It's still soft, translucent, vulnerable. A single bite from a predator, and the cycle ends permanently. In the wild, most Turritopsis never get the chance to reverse. They drift through the water column, pulsing gently, filtering microorganisms, and they are consumed. By fish, by sea turtles, by other jellyfish. Immortality means nothing if you're part of the food chain. But there's another reason they haven't taken over. Reversing takes energy. Transforming every cell in your body, rewriting your biological code, regressing to infancy, it's costly. The jellyfish must be in the right conditions: stable temperature, available food, minimal stress, beyond the trigger itself. In the chaos of the open ocean, those conditions are rare. So instead of being everywhere, Turritopsis exists in a strange balance. Potentially eternal, but practically finite. Theoretically unlimited, but constrained by the same brutal mathematics that govern all life. And yet they're spreading. In recent decades, Turritopsis dohrnii has been found far beyond the Mediterranean. Scientists have documented them in the Caribbean, off the coast of Japan, near Panama, in the waters of Florida. They hitch rides on ships, clinging to hulls as polyps, drifting through ballast water, colonizing new ecosystems. Some researchers have begun calling them the world's only truly invasive immortal species. But calling them invasive misses the point. Because Turritopsis isn't conquering the ocean through aggression or competition. It's doing so through patience, through persistence, through the simple fact that while everything else dies and disappears, it can choose to begin again. Here's what scientists are trying to understand. Can the process be triggered intentionally, or does it only happen under specific stress conditions? Is there a limit to how many times a single jellyfish can reverse? Or is the loop truly infinite? What happens to memory, to experience, to individuality? When the jellyfish regresses, does anything of the previous life remain encoded in its cells? That last question might sound philosophical, but it's deeply biological. Because memory, in some organisms, isn't just stored in brains. Planarian flatworms retain learned behaviors even after their heads are cut off and regrown. Slime molds can remember patterns despite having no nervous system at all. If a jellyfish reverses to a polyp and then matures again, is it the same organism? Or is it a genetic copy with no continuity of self? We don't know. What we do know is that the genes responsible for Turritopsis transdifferentiation are present in some form in other animals, including humans. We have the molecular machinery for cellular reprogramming. It's how stem cell therapy works. It's how cloning works. In laboratories, scientists can take an adult human skin cell, reprogram it into a stem cell, and then coax it into becoming a beating heart cell. But we can't do it to an entire living organism. We can't reverse a human body back to infancy and start over. Turritopsis can. And that raises a question that hovers over every paper, every research grant, every late-night discussion among marine biologists. If we understood how this jellyfish does it, truly understood it, could we do it too? Not should we. Not whether it's ethical. But could we? There's a thought experiment that philosophers return to again and again. If you could live forever, would you want to? Most people say yes, instinctively. More time means more experiences, more knowledge, more love, more sunsets, more music, more everything. But immortality in practice is different than immortality in theory. Because the universe doesn't stop for you. The sun will still expand and consume the Earth in 5 billion years. Galaxies will still drift apart. Stars will still burn out. Eventually, if you lived long enough, you would witness the heat death of the universe itself, a state of maximum entropy where no energy flows, no stars shine, and nothing happens ever again. And you would still be there, alone, conscious, eternal. The immortal jellyfish doesn't think about this, of course. It has no brain, no awareness, no concept of self. It doesn't fear death because it doesn't understand death. It simply exists, and when existence becomes untenable, it resets. But for us, the idea is heavier. Because immortality without purpose is a kind of curse. Immortality without change is stagnation. And immortality without end is a prison no one can escape. The jellyfish doesn't escape either. It just loops. Over and over. Young, old, young, old. An endless cycle with no progression, no evolution, no destination. It has solved death. But it hasn't solved meaning. Right now, in laboratories around the world, researchers are studying Turritopsis dohrnii not for philosophical reasons, but for medical ones. Because if we can understand exact genetic and molecular triggers that allow this jellyfish to reverse cellular aging, we might be able to apply those insights to human medicine. Not to make humans immortal, that's science fiction, but to make human cells regenerate more effectively. To reverse damage from strokes, heart attacks, spinal injuries. To treat age-related diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, arthritis. To heal what was once thought permanent. The implications are staggering, but so are the unknowns. Because every time we think we understand Turritopsis, it reveals another layer of complexity. Another protein we didn't account for. Another environmental factor that changes the outcome. Another mystery nested inside the last one. And that's the deeper truth here. The immortal jellyfish isn't just a biological curiosity. It's a reminder that life is stranger, more adaptable, and more resilient than we ever imagined. That the rules we think are absolute, birth, aging, death, are really just patterns. And patterns can be broken. But breaking them comes with consequences we're only beginning to understand. Somewhere in the ocean right now, a translucent jellyfish the size of a pinky nail is drifting through dark water. It might be young. It might be old. It might have lived this life a dozen times before, or 100, or more than we can count. We'll never know, because there's no way to track a single individual across transformations. No way to mark it, measure it, follow its story. It exists in the present, constantly, recursively, without memory or record. And maybe that's the final lesson. That immortality, real immortality, isn't about remembering forever. It's about the ability to let go completely, to dissolve what you were, to become unwritten, and then to begin again, as if for the first time, with no weight of the past. The immortal jellyfish has mastered something we never will. Not eternal life, but eternal rebirth. And in the cold, indifferent mathematics of the ocean, where everything eats and is eaten, where storms scatter and currents erase, maybe that's the only kind of forever that actually works. Scientists still don't know how many times a single jellyfish can cycle. They don't know if there's a limit written somewhere in its DNA, or if the process could truly continue indefinitely under perfect conditions. They don't know if Turritopsis experiences anything at all. Pain, peace, continuity, or silence. What they do know is this. In a universe where entropy always wins, where complexity breaks down, where stars die and species vanish and continents erode into the sea, there's a creature no bigger than your fingernail that has found a way to run the clock backwards. Not forever, but enough. And in the space between those two words, forever and enough, lies one of the most profound mysteries life has ever produced. We are still trying to understand it, and maybe that's exactly as it should be, because some things aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us that we are still, even now, surrounded by worlds we cannot see, governed by rules we do not know, filled with creatures whose existence rewrites everything we thought was true. The ocean is full of them, and we've barely begun to look.